All right, Devin, crowdfunding corner. Hopping into that, we've got, I think, 8 different projects that end between the 19th and the 26th of September, and I think some cool looking ones this week. So excited to look at these. First one, this is a 2-player card game from a designer that I really like. His name is John Cloudis, and I have one of his other games. It's called Omen. I have 2 versions of it actually, and I think it's a really, really good 2-player card game. And this one is much more unique. Omen is like a lane battler where you have 3 lanes and you're trying to win the lanes, which is a pretty common like head-to-head card game idea. In this one, they say it's like worker placement and area majority and deck building, but you're using cards to do all of those things. So the card you place out as a worker to a spot, which can activate some ability. That ability might let you draw new cards from your deck or put new cards in your deck. And whoever wins the locations, kind of the area majority stuff there, will get some influence. There's also like segments of the board that let you draw cards from your opponent's deck. You can convert like cards from your opponent's deck into converts that come over to your side of the board. And if you get enough converts, then you'll get 1 influence, and whoever at the end of the rounds has the most influence wins. Very minimalist art style. Wanted to give this game a shout out just not only because John Cloudis makes really great 2-player card games, but because he kind of like self-publishes his games too. I think he did have a partnership with Colossal for Omen, but this game and a lot of his other games he publishes himself under this label I think called Small Box Games, and he makes them very quickly because they're already finished. It's going to deliver in November, which most board games when you back them on crowdfunding are like at least a year. I think a few weeks ago, Devin, we looked at a game that was like February 2026 as the delivery date. So really cool. He delivers them fast. It's really expensive to get them shipped out of America. His company is based in, I think, Georgia. So anyways, wanted to give it a shout out. Looks like a really cool and unique card game. You actually sit next to your opponent as opposed to like across from them across the lanes. But he has an explanation video of how the game works on the page, and I think it looks really cool. So that's Pariahs, 2-player card game. It's on Kickstarter till the 19th. Okay, next up is a reprint of a game called Pest that I hadn't heard of, but it's a Euro game where you are trying to kind of stop the plague from taking over the town, which sounds similar to a game we talked about last week, but the one last week was a small roll and write game. This is a big game with minis and very expensive, but it has a reprint. This is the 2nd edition, so if you bought the 1st edition, there's like an upgrade pack you can get for your first game to like rebalance it, and an expansion called the Guilds of Thokaia, maybe, which comes with 2 different modules, the Guild Hall and the Clusters modules. This game has quite a few different mechanisms going on. Devin, if you click on the, I think it might be the gameplay section there, and scroll past the videos, I think we should get to the section where it kind of explains how the game works. But there's different phases. In the Pest phase, a new card will come out that explains like where the plague is going to attack, and then it's like the action phase where you can move around. You can put sections in quarantine. You can cure people. You can then assign those cured people to buildings that you have built. You can build buildings all over the city. And there's also this big like capital miniature that goes in the center of the city. You can assign people there to get more influence. So that's like a big plastic miniature there in the middle. There's probably an image of the whole board somewhere, but pretty big, lots of pieces. No, this isn't like a cheap small game. It's a big one with lots of wooden pieces and some miniatures as well. So When I first looked at the cover, I was like, oh, is this a social deduction game? But it does look like a pretty competent Euro game. So I want to read about it a little bit more. I like that kind of what do they call that dude? He's like the plague doctor, but it has a better name than that. That vibe with like the guy with the long nose. Looks like a raven man. Gives me Bloodborne vibes, even though it's not that. But anyways, that's Pest. It's on Gamefound. Also ends on the 19th. So if you have the first game and just need the upgrade pack or want to get into this Pest game, they have a few different pledge levels. The all-in one is 306 Australian dollars, which is 204 US dollars. I did that conversion earlier today. But they have like a more essentials version that I think ditches some of the minis and stuff. So, but I think even that version was like 100 and something. So kind of a pricey game, but it has a cool vibe. I like that there's more Euro elements. This isn't like a, yeah, I don't know. It's not a social deduction game. It looks pretty solid. So that is what I say was called Pest. All right, next up is one of the other hottest games on the Board Game Geek list this week. It's Cyberpunk 2077. Already has almost $4 million backed, and I think like 14,000 backers, which is crazy. This is a cooperative, which kind of doesn't kill it for me right at the beginning, but it kind of does. I'm not a huge co-op guy. Cooperative, story-driven, tactical action game with real-time fights. That was a lot of words. But basically, you're trying to, there's like a story campaign with I think like 14 different scenarios, and they can be of different types. Like this is an extraction or a fight or some kind of something. And then in the scenario, you have a few different phases you go through. I think there's like the upgrade phase where you go to different shops and you can upgrade your character, and then you go out and like try to complete the mission. You can explore like side areas and stuff too. And then you might get in fights. When you get in a fight, you start a timer. So they're real-time fights, and then you have to like play cards and talk quickly with your teammates to determine like who's going to lead this fight and what cards are we going to play. Because there's a real-time element to the game, which usually board gamers don't like real-time stuff. Maybe there's a way to like remove it if you want it to be like turn-based, like, okay, now it's your turn, and now it's your turn. But I think by default, it has that real-time fight element. You can play as V, Panam, Jackie, or Judy. And I think in the stretch goals, there's quite a few other characters that they have now unlocked. Johnny Silverhand, I think that's his name, is in the game as well. I don't know if he's a player character or kind of an adversary character or whatever he is, but there's a lot of stuff on this page, lots of new stretch goals being unlocked. Again, it's kind of a pricey game. You can get the base version that doesn't have any minis for like, I think it's $80, and then the deluxe version here is $140 that does have the miniatures, but that doesn't include the expansions, I don't believe. So if you want all the expansions too, you got to add those on, and then there's other add-ons you can get too. This is very much one of those, I don't know, a lot of crowdfunding games are focused on, it's just like more and more expansion, more miniatures, and sometimes they look really cool. Like Grim Coven looked really cool a few months ago. And this one looks cool as well. I think like visually it looks really cool. The boards are cool. You get to like slot in your character, and you slot in all these modules at the top and can like, just like in the game, like adjust their, I think you can like use tech to upgrade your eyes and weaponry and stuff. So I don't know. It looks cool, but I don't think this is a game for David. Devin, I think you played the video game pretty recently and enjoyed it, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you think a board game based on that would be fun? Probably hard to envision.
It's hard because board games have so many different mechanics. I don't know that I've ever played a co-op board game in my life.
Yeah, I don't have many. I only have a few, so you might not have. I think you played Forbidden Island with me once, where we were trying to get those different parts of that ship before the island sank. It was many years ago, though, so you might not even remember that.
Yeah, it could be fun though.
Yeah, it could be
pretty.
fun. It is pretty. After you've completed the story, they have what they're calling an endless afterlife mission generator. So you can generate new missions by choosing a mission category, again, like a fight or an extraction or whatever. And then you can generate new scenarios, I guess. So even though the main story will be done, you can continue doing more scenarios. I do think, like I mentioned, it's story driven. So I think there are segments where you'll stop to like read kind of like a scenario prompt, like, hey, you are approached by this guy and they're looking like this and they say this to you. Do you want to A, fight them, B, run away, C, whatever? And then you choose an option, and then there's a skill check, like, okay, you said you wanted to run away, so as long as your movement speed is level 7, you were successful. I do have one game behind me that has a similar idea to that. It's called Near and Far, but it's a bit more of a Euro game with those things kind of in it as well. I'm not sure if I love story elements in board games, but I would love to be convinced by one that I just thought was excellent. Maybe Near and Far will be that. We'll see. Anyways, that one ends on September 20th. Okay. Next up is Minecart Town. This is a pretty simple tile laying game, but I feel like it has some cool elements. And I think it's actually a remake of an earlier game that's just kind of been expanded a little bit as well from a new publisher in Japan called Jelly Jelly Games. In this game, you start with like a little starting building that is the beginning of your town that has like a mountain and a forest maybe that will generate some resources that are probably like stone and wood for you. And then you're going to be getting new tiles in your town that'll be like buildings, or that one listed there is a breeding grounds that breeds, or that gives you the white resource, which is probably cotton or something, or wool. Cool thing about this game is you then have to build railroad tracks from the different buildings in your town. And then on your turn, you can move those resources along the railroad tracks. And when you move them along the railroad tracks, eventually you can get them to a, what do they call it? It's not a conversion. Oh yeah, a processing, like a place that will say like, you can process 2 coal and a wool here for X number of points. So you have to be careful with how you build your railroad tiles in order to be able to get your resources from the place they are built to the processing plants. And it looks like a cool little town by the end. Pretty simple tile laying game, but I like that idea of moving your stuff around on the tracks. It's a little pricey to ship this from Japan, which is very common with games made in Japan, but I thought it looked pretty cool. There's a lot of tile placement games nowadays, but that kind of unique vibe of making sure that you have those railroad tracks tying all of your stuff together, I thought was cool enough that I wanted to bring up Minecart Town. That one on Kickstarter ends on the 23rd, and it does have a tabletop simulator mod and a print and play version too. So if you're really good at that kind of stuff, you could print the digital files and put it on your own, like cardboard or acrylic tiles. That would be pretty hardcore and cool. I don't know that I'm that cool, but maybe one day. Okay, next up is a game that when I first saw it, I was like, there's no way I'm covering this on Crowdfunding Corner, because the artwork looks like my 8-year-old drew Dragon Tales. It doesn't look that bad, actually. I don't want it to sound bad. It just looks like it's very much aimed at kids, right? That's like the first vibe I got from that. But the game is actually like fairly competent. It's like a card drafting and dice drafting game where you're trying to build this tableau of cards in front of you. They start on their gray side, and then if you take the correct dice, you can flip them to their blue side, and then where they connect might get you some bonuses, or these cloud tokens that will let you, I think, adjust the die value of the dice that you draft. I watched a video about how to play this one, and I was like, wow, that seems like a pretty solid, like lighter game. And it's meant for kids 10 plus. I was like, man, I don't want to like throw any shade at the game because I kind of like the art, to be honest, but I feel like if they had gone for an art style that was just slightly older, because this looks like an art style that would be in a game for, I don't know, 5 or 6 year olds, in my opinion. And I think just a slightly older facing art style would have helped this game to seem like it's more like the 10 plus age. It reminds me of a game that I really love called Sheepy Time. I'm actually going to grab it just for reference. Sheepy Time is an excellent push your luck game where you're trying to decide like how many times you can go around this track before this like evil nightmare piece goes around the track or touches you too many times. It's excellent. It's one of my friends that comes to my game night. It's his favorite game. I asked him to rate it on a scale from 1 to 10, and he's like, "Can I give it 100?" Like he loves it. But this is what the cover looks like, and so you see that like that cover, and you're like, "Man, this is not a game for me because I'm a gamer and I play games. I don't color in a coloring book." So sometimes the color or the cover very much deceiving in board games, just like with books. And this one caught me off guard because, again, it looks like, what would you say that looks like? My Little Pony? Is that like that art style?
Yeah, it looks like a coloring book. It's crazy.
But the game seems pretty competent, in my opinion. So, yeah, I said a lot of words there. And I don't think this is like it's a pretty light game still, but it looks solid for a light game. So I wanted to give Sky Painters a shout out. It ends on the 24th. Also on Kickstarter. Yeah. And another kind of fantasy focused game here. We got Moon Bunny. This one's done pretty well. It's already got 110,000 and almost 2,000 backers. This one has 2 different pledge levels, and it looks, to be honest, in my opinion, like a simpler game than the one we just looked at. Again, the kind of the art style can be deceiving here. This one doesn't look like it'd be incredibly heavy either, but you have these rabbits. This one's kind of based on, what do they say it's based on? Japanese lunar mythology or something like that. That might be totally wrong, but you move these rabbits along this grid of tiles and take them into your shop. Wow, that P really popped. Into your shop in order to, I think, just have the best shop. It's a pretty simple like game where you are taking those tiles in your shop and you're making mooncakes, and then whoever does that the best wins. And I think the different rabbits have different movement rules. Like one can move in a straight line, one can move in different directions. And so, again, pretty simple. You're just taking those tiles from that board. It is really pretty. It has 2 different versions. The deluxe version is like very pretty and has like a gold box with like different art on the back of the box.
It has mooncake squishies.
Yeah, I saw that. I was wondering
and
if they were
acrylic tiles.
Yeah, and acrylic tiles are awesome. When that says mooncake squishies, I'm wondering if they're as nicely squishy as like the pieces in Honey Buzz, because those are like, ooh, those are a good squish. So hopefully those are great. Vibe of this reminds me of this Netflix show that my kids really loved that I can't remember the name of, but it was all about this little girl whose mom died, and then she built a rocket to the moon, and their family had a shop that made mooncakes, and she had a pet bunny. And so again, it just must be all based on that same, type of Japanese legend or whatever that we don't know as well in America. But it was a cool movie that my kids liked for a long time. Very, very strange, but cool. So anyways, that's Moon Bunny. It's got a little bit of buzz at this point, but it seems like a fairly simple, lightweight game. All right, 2 more here. First is kind of the opposite. This is a pretty complex tactical card game for 2 or 4 players. This one is, yeah, it's a trading card game. And so when you start, you choose a hero and kind of their mech suit, and that will be like your character. And your opponent does as well. And then you build a deck. And that's probably where this game loses me. But I don't know. I have the Lord of the Rings TCG or LCG living card game, and I wanted to get into that, which does also have you build decks. So this might be like a mechanism that I'm okay with. There are different types of decks. They recommend an aggro deck for a starting deck, for example, but you can get more subtle, I guess, than that. The field of play has like it's a grid, rows and columns, where you're setting out the first 2 rows in front of you are your base. Then there's like the space. They call it the Nix, the space area in between the 2 players, and then the other player's base. And you're putting cards out and attacking and destroying the other people's cards, all with the goal of destroying your opponent's pilot. To destroy their pilot, you have to destroy their mech that they're in first. So if you like kind of a hardcore one-on-one, I'm imagining this is primarily going to be a one-on-one game, even though it has a 2v2 mode in, I think, the more expensive version of the game. Then I think it's supposed to be pretty solid. It had some pretty good previews and buzz. I think the artwork is pretty cool, to be honest. I just, yeah, I don't know. I'm very picky with head-to-head card games. I really like Radlands. I like Omen that I mentioned earlier. And I have one that I backed a few months ago called Sovereign that had similar like sci-fi art, but it was a little bit different and more like what would you call that? A little less focused on just like damage and me throwing damage tokens all over your characters. But this one might be really, really solid. So I don't really have a ton more to say about it. There's a ton of cards with lots of different categories of cards. You got biomes and reactors and pilots and mechs, and I think location cards that you can put on the side of the board that affect like the entire play state. Again, if you like card games, Magic the Gathering and things like that, I imagine this might be up your alley. It's kind of pricey for like a deck of cards and a little mat, in my opinion. But I don't know. Trading card games are just generally expensive. So that is Havoc Gen 0, which is a also on Kickstarter and ends on September 26th. All right, and then last up for this week, we've got Natera New Beginning. This is a, they say expert level worker placement game. I think it looks a little more medium. If you've played medium weight Euro game, I think you'd be just fine. I watched a video and read a bit of the rulebook. It looks like it'd be closer to a 3 out of 5 on the heaviness scale and not a 4, in my opinion. But it looks pretty cool, to be honest. There's 4 different factions of animals, and you are exploring out from the center of the board in this kind of forest area to these 4 different regions of this world that used to have people in it but don't anymore. And you put out your workers and get stuff, and you can also play cards and use the abilities on the cards. And every time you go explore in the different regions, your what do they call it? I think it's your influence in that region goes up. So each of the 4 regions has a different influence track. And eventually someone will get to the 3rd spot on the influence track, and then the tier 2 buildings become accessible to anyone that's reached that far. And then the tier 3 ones can as well a little bit later. So it has a cool progression kind of out from the center of the board. And if you have the most influence in a region, then you get this cool, like, I control this region tile, and you get some extra bonuses at the end of each round. So it's a kind of medium weight, like, worker placement card game, but it has some cool, like, area control elements that I really liked. So yeah, I don't know. I just think it looks pretty cool. You can also build settlements out on the different locations on the board, and they'll kind of give you control of them. And if anyone else goes to that location, then you get stuff. So you're kind of fighting for control on the board. You got the worker placement on the board. If you have a control of a region, you get a cool bonus at the end of the round. You can play cards out, and the different cards do different things. If it's got an orange back, then it gives you a new like action that you can do on your turn as opposed to playing a worker. So I don't know. I think it looks like it could be pretty solid. I also want to give them a shout out. I like it when companies just have one version of the game. It might be a little nice if this one had two, to be honest. But this one version that they doubled down on is they call it a pre-stretched deluxe version. So everything looks nice. Like the wooden pieces are all like screen printed. Comes with a little mini expansion with extra cards. The player boards and the main board are double layered, which is cool. Those buildings will go in kind of these inserts on the main board. I love double layered boards. They call them dual layered actually, so I don't know why I'm saying double, but so yeah, I think it looks really cool. It is $89, I think, but I mean it looks high quality, I think, in my opinion. So yeah, that's Natera New Beginning, kind of a cool animal theme where humans have gone extinct, the way of the dodo. That one ends on the 26th as well, and that one is our last game in Crowdfunding Corner this week. And Devin, you know what time that means it is. It means it's time for Devin, the Halloween Guy's Pick of the Week.
For me, it's not even close. We got to go Natera.
Yeah, I thought it would be. This is I have two that I really liked, and a couple others that I thought looked solid as well. But yeah, this Natera one is definitely one of them. Yeah, I think it looks awesome. I mean, I love medium weight worker placement games, so it's already like right on my alley. But it has like asymmetric player powers, dual layered boards, lots of cool wooden pieces. You get to play as a gorilla or a badger. Might be a beaver, not a badger. I know animals, I think. Yeah, I think it looks really cool. But I think just for a little diversity's sake, I'm going to give my shout out to Pariahs, that card game that we started with. Again, I really like card games from John Cloudis, and just want to really support like a uber indie like card game here. And yeah, his games have like really unique ideas in them, and this one looks like it's off the charts with like crazy ideas like stealing cards from your opponent's deck as converts, and if you get so many of those you get a point, and if you win the area majority locations you get a point, and it's all kind of about becoming the most influential kind of a clan in this government, I guess. But really it's a card game, but looks really fun. Yeah, shipping in America I think is $5, maybe $6. Outside of America it's a little more rough just because that's how it is to ship stuff from one country to another. But really two, I was hoping that you picked one of those two so I could pick the other one. So that worked out really nicely. We got Natera New Beginning and Pariahs as our picks of the week this week. That will do it for Crowdfunding Corner.